Okay, hello and welcome. I think we are live. So hello to our audience on LinkedIn. We've got a great session in store today with my guests Tom Emmerich and Amy LaMeyer, who I'll introduce in a moment. But first of all, what we're going to do in this session, Tom has written some amazing pieces. Like every year he comes out with his 2023 predictions, or review of kind of 2023 predictions, and then kind of a look forward to the next year. So we're going to be firmly looking into 2024, and I think the big thing on everybody's lips for 2024 is spatial computing. So we're going to dive into that. But first of all, introductions. My name is Dave Haynes. I'm from FOV Ventures. If you haven't heard of us, we're an early stage fund that invests into founders that are building in the spaces of metaverse, XR, spatial computing, whatever we call it in 2024. And we invest up to €500,000 in pre-seed and seed rounds. So that's me. Let me pass you over to Tom and then to Amy to give their intros.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Tom Emmerich. I am the Director of Product for Augmented Reality Platforms at Niantic. And so I head up product development for a couple of development platforms that Niantic offers, including our web-based augmented reality platform, Eighth Wall, as well as our Unity-based SDK called Lightship ARDK, and our newly launched rewarded AR ads product, which is running in our popular games that you might know, like Pokemon Go and Monster Hunter now. I've been in the augmented reality space for over a decade. I love to call myself AR's #1 fanboy. Haven't stopped talking about it since I found out about it. And I'm really excited to be here with Dave and Amy, and I'll pass it over to Amy to say hi and introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Amy LaMeyer, one of the two managing partners of WXR Fund. Similar to Dave, we invest in companies that are doing interesting things in using AR, VR, and AI. We have a female founder requirement, so all of our founders are, at least one of the major founders are a woman. And we have a portfolio of 14 companies across all genres. I've been in this space for 8 years, so less than Tom, but he and I have been talking about this topic for that entire time. So looking forward to digging in and talking about 2024.
Yeah, awesome. And so how we're going to run this, so we can actually see the comments that are coming in LinkedIn. I know there's some like amazingly talented people and founders and other investors in the audience. So at any point, if you want to post a comment or question in LinkedIn, I can pull those out of the chat, hopefully, if everything works, and we can kind of weave that into our conversation rather than just talk at you and then take some questions at the end. And what we're going to do, we've probably got about, I mean, the list of, I think it's 24 predictions for 2024, right, Tom? And I mean, it's a pretty exhaustive list with some really interesting things. We're only going to have time to get to maybe 6 or 7 of those, but I'm sure we'll expand a little bit. But I'm going to put those onto the screen, read them out. Tom's going to give us his thoughts, and then we're going to discuss and move on. So, right, let's get going. So, number 1, spatial computing knocks the hype cycle crown of Gen AI as it takes its place at the peak of inflated expectations. And I think this is interesting when you look at what you predicted for 2023, which was I think 2023 was really, well, 2022 was the metaverse hype, right? Everything was metaverse. Everything at that CES, that January was all metaverse. Now it moved last year to Gen AI, and now we're kind of moving on to spatial computing. So I'm never quite sure what terms mean what and which buzzwords are the right ones. But Tom, maybe you can kind of talk us through this one.
Sure. I mean, I'm a big fan of Gartner's hype cycle. I think there's a lot of validity to it, and certainly the media wraps their arms around it. And it seems, in particular to the media, that one technology tends to get the most amount of limelight per year. That's not to say that there's not a lot of work and amazing innovation that's happening in other camps. Certainly there is. Metaverse, as you mentioned, had the crown in 2022. And then as soon as generative AI became known to the media and more to the mainstream, it engulfed the conversation. That's not to say that this year we're not going to continue to see a lot of innovation in Gen AI, and certainly we're still seeing a lot of talk around generative AI and AI-enabled solutions. I suspect, though, just like the metaverse did from 2022 to 2023, that Gen AI is going to move through the trough of disillusionment and start to have more of a keen focus on the enterprise. We saw at the end of 2023 that there were some, regulatory copyright issues that were being raised around the use of generative AI. Some social concerns, privacy concerns that were being raised. Just overall pricing and the ins and outs of how to make this part of an integral solution. So a lot of hard hitting kind of questions around the use of this innovation were being raised at the tail end of the year, which suggests that we're going to move into a time where a lot of the focus is going to be around enterprise use, work use of Gen AI, which means it's going to move out of the sunshine of the consumer sphere, which is where the media tends to gravitate. And so taking its reign, I kind of reading through the tea leaves is spatial computing. I indicated it would be spatial computing because of Apple's announcement and their choice of words and their announcement around their mixed reality device, the Apple Vision Pro. When I had a draft of this article originally, the term I was going to choose was mixed reality, actually. But as soon as Apple decided not to use mixed reality, virtual reality, or augmented reality, and instead chose spatial computing or spatial computer, I put all my money on that term as the term that would be the one that we'd be talking the most about.
I think we have a bad habit in this industry of kind of just spending a lot of our time debating terms, and they all mean slightly different things, right? But Amy, I mean, you kind of when you announced what you did with your fund, you said, well, we invest in VR, AR, and AI. Like, is that spatial computing? Is that something else? Like how? And I'd love if anyone has their own definition, please put it in the chat, and I'll put a few up. But I mean, I'd love to hear just your definition of spatial computing. And it was interesting to see Apple really come down on its developers and say, don't call your apps a VR or an AR app. They said, call them spatial computing apps. So
yeah, I think
this is just a debate we're going to have for the next 12 months.
Yeah. And to your point, they are, though they are a little bit different, there's so much similarity. When we actually announced the fund, we said spatial computing and AI. So, and then shifted it later because people weren't using that term back then, 4 years ago. And, but to us, it's that concept of moving from this two-dimensional world to a three-dimensional world. And what are all of the ways that we do that, be it a headset or mobile, using mobile for 3D or audio, computer vision, right? Like there's just so many ways that our technology is going to move from being flat screen to a three-dimensional viewing and interaction. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, I mean, the great thing about Apple really pushing this term is that there's a lot of people that were a little bit burnt by kind of, they used VR back in 2016, 2017, and they put a cardboard on and did a roller coaster and said, oh no, VR is not for me. I think just the whole reframing, the way that I think that's great for startups as well, right? Because it means that a bunch of investors, and we'll talk about this later, but a bunch of investors are coming back to the table. But also, if you're a CEO, like just being able to say, hey, look, I'm going to go down to the Apple store, try out this device, and just have it reframed as like, right, something like spatial computing is something that us as a, we as a company should get behind. I think that would be really interesting to see the knock-on effects. Yeah, maybe to push back a little bit, Tom. I think Gen AI is, if you look at the number of users that OpenAI have, like I'm using Google's Bard a lot. It does feel like Gen AI is something that a lot of people are using day to day. Whereas I think even with the Vision Pro launching, and that will only be to kind of really early adopters, like the everyday person, I think Gen AI probably will affect their lives more regularly than spatial computing, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can get on board with that. Again, like thinking about the hype cycle and what it means to be at the top of the hype cycle does not indicate adoption. It just indicates what's going to consume a lot of the conversation around technology this year. So that's how I would see this. It means that a lot of thinking, a lot of strategies are going to be put in place around spatial computing. because the global mindset, the mind share is going to be focused on this new buzzword, this new category. And I think like what we're talking about is really important because especially with the metaverse, when the metaverse was again at that peak, for me, the metaverse really symbolized the coming together of emerging technologies and this indication of a new tech stack that includes AR, VR, AI, blockchain. With I think a lot of education around AI and generative AI in particular last year, we're moving into now this umbrella term, spatial computing, which again is causing us to take a look at a stack of technologies and how they work together to indicate the next wave of computing. And so one thing that I hope we all take away from this year is that spatial computing is not augmented reality. Spatial computing is not virtual reality. It is an umbrella term that really is meant to sum up technologies that enable computers to perceive, interact, and navigate the 3D space or the 3D world. And so there's some commonality between the technology trends that have dominated the past now 3 years.
Yeah, I think Jim here in the comment agrees, saying he wants to see more exploration of the non-reality simulating applications of spatial interfaces. So he's happy with spatial computing as a term. Tom, you also you mentioned when we were kind of met in the green room before about some other kind of spatial computing devices like new displays, things like smart binoculars. Like, were there any kind of other non-VR and AR applications of spatial computing that you saw whilst out at CES?
Yeah, I mean, interactive projection mapping is a really good example of head-worn spatial experiences. Even lenticular displays, 3D displays that track your eyes is another example of that. Robots that have the ability to use LiDAR and cameras and other sensors to understand what's around them and also place projection mapping on the right wall or the right ceiling, depending on where you're looking, which is what Bali now does from Samsung is another example. And also anything to do with autonomous vehicles falls under spatial computing as well. So I love Jim's point about raising up this umbrella and what this umbrella means. And I think it will give AR and VR more context. And one of the more powerful things that we can do is stitch together all of the emerging technologies under one broader story, so that it's much more powerful for both the consumer, the developer, the investor, to get on board, because then we're starting to really see the next wave of computing and not just one aspect of it.
Yeah. Cool. So let's maybe jump into some of the use cases we expect to see in 2024. And you kind of had an area of like consumer solutions, but also enterprise solutions. If I stick up prediction number 21 here, so spatial computers give us a glimpse into the future of work. Yeah, I'd love to kind of hear what you meant by that, Tom, and Amy, your thoughts on it.
Oh, let's hear Amy first. I would love to hear, Amy, what your thoughts are on spatial computing and work.
Yeah, I mean, what we're definitely seeing, and you touched on this in your article as well, training being a huge area in the enterprise, and how do we train folks and use VR to do that. We're even seeing some investment in that area. If you look at Transfer that raised 40 million, some of the AR companies that are getting to Series C levels of funding, which is good to see finally. So I think that's a huge space where we're going to see spatial computing in the future of work.
I agree with training and simulation. I remember when it was, I think 2019, I did my keynote at AWE called The Death of Reality. And one of the things that I talked about was the death of education as we know it, and the rise of simulation, and how learning from a textbook or watching a video will slowly go away as we have this ability to actually simulate the things that we're trying to learn. And certainly VR and MR have that have that capability. And so I think we'll continue to see training and simulation as a hero with mixed reality devices. I kind of spoke a little bit to those that are really serious about training and simulation for very serious tasks are going to look to higher quality pass-through devices like Vario. If you're trying to train for like the Air Force in particular, you're going to need the right devices to do so. But I think one of the other areas that we're seeing as well, that maybe we may see more with just professionals at the office or even at home, is really the infinite monitor use case. And I think for many in the XR space, that we've been in the XR space for a while, the floating monitor use case may not seem so advanced, I guess I'll put it. It's, you just have floating screens in front of you. But there really is a lot of validity to having what Apple calls an infinite canvas, and the ability to, multitask, have different screens instead of multiple tabs, to be able to size things up. And then the advanced capability of being able to pop out 3D data visualizations or 3D models when needed. So I think this is going to be quite a big hero for a number of the devices, is this infinite monitor use case. And then, of course, the ability to do what we're doing, but in a much more human way, this remote collaboration, telepresence will continue to be another hero use case. And certainly we're seeing avatars and more realistic avatars, or in Apple's case, what they call personas, being a key part of that type of use case for these devices.
And that's where I think the word glimpse is important, right? Because that's the beginning of it. And so that was a key word in your statement. I'm also interested in using 3D as a creation tool as part of the future of work. So something like Shapes XR. How are people starting to develop more and use three-dimensional tools to create three-dimensional content? So I think that'll be an interesting movement into the future of work as well.
Yeah, I think for me, when I think about what's new for 2024, I mean, I think training, design, collaboration have already proven, like for VR and also to a lesser extent AR, they've already proven to be killer use cases. Like if you want to do safety training, like, great, there's a lot of like companies out there that will allow you to do that in VR today. I think it's just a long maturation cycle for those to get adopted. But what's new for 2024 is what Tom said about just this infinite canvas. And it seems so simple, but just like literally having, lots of kind of 2D screens and 3D like objects, and just being able to say, right, I've got my MacBook in front of me. Now, if I've got my Vision Pro on, I've got the same thing, plus the augmentation of kind of VR and 3D. And I think what was the big barrier to that, because there has been applications like Immerse and a few others that have done that and allowed like co-working in VR. But just the kind of the resolution of the screens and the simplicity of the user interfaces, combined with the fact that I've got all of my phone and then my MacBook there at the same time. So I think that will be a game changer. Anybody like in any workforce can put the headset on and find it like instant utility. Whereas before, getting VR into the workplace was more of a top-down thing. It was like, right, you're my worker, you're going to do 2 hours of training, put this VR headset on. Whereas now it's going to be, I go into the Apple store, I think, oh, do you know what? If I buy this, I can be more productive at work, or I can work on a big presentation in private on the plane and things like that. So it'll be, maybe I'm kind of getting too ahead of myself, but I think that will be such a simple use case that will drive a lot of adoption.
I think
100%.
So too. But I think cost and comfort are key there. And I don't think we're there in either place. So maybe the next headset that's more comfortable and more affordable. But a glimpse is right. And I agree with both of you that is the way of the future.
Yeah. I agree with you, Amy. I agree with cost and comfort 100%. And also one thing that is necessary for us in this use case is resolution. And so like in order for us to work within these headsets, we need to be able to read within these headsets. That's critical. And that's where, the Apple Vision Pro and Vario kind of approach in really focusing on resolution is key. And then in addition to cost and comfort, it's also how we interact within these headsets. How easy is it to actually do work? It's not just about reading, it's about being able to type or at least get words on a page, or how do I do a keynote presentation more easily within these devices? So all of these need to be really figured out. But Dave, one thing I will say is like, I love that we're talking about infinite monitors, and it isn't a new thing. And actually, like, I didn't put it necessarily in my report, but it does feel like a lot of things that were 2015, 2016 are like coming back. And so for us, it's going to be a little bit of a like deja vu, but for a lot of people, it's going to be quite new. So, 360, 180 video, 3D movies, infinite monitors. Like we've been through this before. So what's different? What's different is like the device, yes, but it's also, it takes a while for this to kind of marinate within, the culture. And I think it's been now, what is it, 8 years, 7, 8 years since 2016. And so, the advancements of technology meeting the readiness of, of culture, I think is what we're starting to see here. In addition to all the tech giants just now being in, like legitimately, they're all in.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go to the consumer use cases and talking about use cases we've seen. I put this prediction in, but Tom, you also had number 17 was talking about like immersive media, like 360 video and things like that. But let's talk about the this kind of reliving memories becomes a killer app for mixed reality. I've been taking a lot of spatial videos, quote unquote, over my holidays this Christmas. And I can't wait to get a headset where I'm actually going to be able to go in and see those. But, to your point, I've been taking 360 videos since whenever, like 2017 with the Insta1 camera. So how is this new? Are you excited about this use case?
I'm excited about it. I remember one of my very first moments was sitting in a Flickr photo in virtual reality. It was like it was just like a starry sky, but there was just something so meaningful about being present in that photo. And so I've always been very excited about playing with memories and being present in the past with video and photos using virtual reality, now mixed reality. It's a very Minority Report use case, as we recall, with Tom Cruise and him going through his memories of his wife and child. So I think it's been part of like the dream of many in watching science fiction. So to see that come to life with devices is quite exciting. And this is a storytelling use case which requires a lot of great storytelling around it to raise it up as a hero. And who best to be able to do that than Apple, as they have already done with the launch of the Apple Vision Pro. And I suspect we're going to see a lot of really great press and storytelling from Apple around the power of being able to relive experiences of people that are no longer here, things that have happened that are meaningful to you or to the culture. Yeah, I'm very excited about the use case.
Amy, your thoughts on these and some other consumer use cases we might see in 2024?
Yeah, I'm particularly excited about this one and a little bit surprised that it didn't take off earlier. I remember even just as simple, there was a company called Stageverse, and what they did is they brought all your Instagram photos into a virtual space so you could walk through it like a gallery. And even that was powerful and meaningful, being able to walk through your memories. But to truly do it spatially, I think, I'm hoping that Apple does it easier, right? So we can just more easily pop in. Maybe the Ray-Bans will help as we, be able to collect more spatial information. Maybe Snap will come back. I would love to see this happen, is my point. I'm not 100% sure how it's going to happen or who's going to do it. But I'm excited for it. And I think you're right that it's going to be a huge driver for getting folks to want to put on a headset and experience it.
I think for me, I mean, it seems like such a simple use case. You know, it's kind of crazy that we're discussing this as a main point, but it really speaks to a player like Apple coming into the market and kind of raising the bar a bit, because they have that full stack integration. Like, I have a phone with, you know, tens of thousands of videos and photos on it. If I go into my headset and it's connected to my Apple account, that's instantly in there. Now, you could argue that Facebook had the same thing, but I don't feel like they really kind of pushed that use case. And now having these kind of, you know, more advanced cameras on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and I think that's just going to like really blow it open. Like it just, before, when I was taking 360 videos, I would have my Insta1 360 camera, then I would pull out the memory disk, I'd have to upload that onto my computer, side load it onto my Quest, then put it on, and then it's, you know, like, that's only for kind of early adopters. And I think Apple will be able to bring that to the masses. And it's interesting, even the people that I know who've been in the VR industry, the ones that have gone to Cupertino or somewhere else and tried the Vision Pro, they've always been surprised at, like, whoa, okay, yeah, that photo or video use case was interesting. Whether that's something a startup can build on, is there a kind of Instagram for spatial? Like, who knows? Maybe that's something that kind of Meta and Apple will just own. But yeah, really excited to see founders that are starting to think about that.
And I think, Dave, that's one thing I will say, both of you touched on this, is the capture. The capture is actually a big game changer. And I wouldn't even go, I wouldn't be surprised if eventually spatial video becomes default, like when the Apple Vision Pro becomes much cheaper. The fact that Apple's relying on other devices within its ecosystem will be one of its advantages in this space. And so making the Apple iPhone a part of the Apple Vision Pro kind of story and capability is super smart. And I suspect we're going to see that also with the Mac and with the iPad, and also with Apple TV as well.
Cool. So let's change the pace a little bit and talk about investor activity. And actually, we have a comment from Matt in the audience who says, what do you say to LPs and GPs whose response to XR pitches is, we are waiting to see how well the Apple Vision sells this year? I think that's the sentiment from a lot of people. People are excited about a device, but everyone's waiting and seeing. And I'm not sure it's going to be the game changer. You know, we're excited about it, but it's only going to get in the hands of hundreds of thousands of people. So if you are a startup just targeting a device like the Vision Pro, and you're not thinking about the wider like industry, you know, you kind of maybe timing the market a little bit wrong. But before we discuss that, yeah, maybe Tom, you can kind of, you know, give us your thoughts on this, how you see the surge happening.
Sure. I suspect that Apple Vision Pro is going to sell out as soon as it goes to pre-order on Friday. And so that being said, we have reports of the shipment numbers being relatively small in size. And so certainly, as I pointed out in my report, the mixed reality category is really just getting started. And if you were to compare it to a device that's been in our hands now for over a decade, it has a long way to go. So, you know, where we're at today with mixed reality versus where the smartphone is at today, like if you're looking to reach a large audience, that large audience is on smartphone and laptops and PC. But if you're looking for a new blue ocean opportunity where you are seeing the signals of what the next device category is going to be, and by the way, I see the mixed reality category today more like the early days of PC, not even mobile. And so this is kind of where I think we're at with our journey. If you believe that the mixed reality category will continue to evolve and will eventually get to where we're at with PC and then flip over to mobile and its evolution, and you see that today the blue ocean opportunity is within mixed reality with brand new app stores being developed, then as a developer in particular, your opportunity to really make a dent in the universe and succeed is within the mixed reality category. And so I suspect that the mixed reality category, especially since there are now more devices, so Apple Vision Pro, February, we already have the Meta Quest 3, Samsung, Google indicating their device should be coming out later this year. We have ByteDance, Oppo also looking to enter the space. Sony just announced their device. Now that this is a category, developers have much more of a reason to develop solutions for. So that means that we should be seeing much more developer interest, startup interest, and in turn, investors really taking a look at this space in a brand new way than they have before. But I'll let the investors talk about things because I'm not an investor.
Amy?
I'm interested, you and I are invested in the same space, so I'm interested to hear what you have to say, Dave. But so I am hoping and expect that there will be an increase in investment and developer opportunities in 2024. All of that being said, I think when we get to the end of 2024, there will still have been more investment in AI than there will be in spatial computing. And part of that, I think, is investors looking at the opportunities and understanding that there is a blue ocean, but also wanting some sort of a plan towards traction and revenue that will be significant, massive, help the companies get through, several rounds of funding and have the runway to do so to get to the point where they can continue to grow and raise next rounds. And I have gotten pitched several times in the last few months, grand ideas for the Vision Pro. And to your point, they're just not going to sell that many of them as a total. So when they run the numbers, there's no business there yet. Again, more headsets, future headsets will absolutely help, but I still think it's going to be a while before we see true massive dollars in this space. We are seeing more. And it's good to see more, Series B, Series C investments in this space, but I think it's still going to be hard for seed and pre-seed for a while.
Yeah, my sense is, if you split them apart, I think developer activity will certainly increase. I know a lot of developers who have never developed for VR, maybe they've developed for mobile, or they're kind of within Apple's ecosystem. And I think those people will get a device and finally they can kind of try it out. And I know a couple of really smart people who have kind of pitched me ideas of like, hey, when this is up, we've got some ideas, we want to do something. So I'm hoping in 2024 we'll see a lot of people. And by the way, if anyone is in the audience developing for Vision Pro, I'd like leave a comment because I'd love to hear what you're working on, and maybe the other people would. We've talked a lot about Apple, but I also think if you're a developer, I think the Meta ecosystem is really great to invest in now. The numbers that they released at the last Connect in terms of, revenue that the App Store is doing, like if you release something, it gets approved on the App Store, you're still in a world where there is not a huge amount of the apps compared to like the mobile app stores of, iTunes and the Android store. And there's a huge upside. So I think developers now see that they can make a living. Like if you're a games developer, now is a good time to start making VR games, for example, I still think. When it comes to investors, I actually think 2024 investing in XR, maybe not broadly spatial computing, but certainly in XR, I think will still be a contrarian. Like if you're investing in that space, you're still going against the grain. Now, I'm completely happy with that because that means hopefully I'm not paying kind of crazy valuations. I'm sure we'll see a few kind of buzzy rounds that get high that are targeting the Vision Pro. Maybe it's an ex-Apple team or somebody just with an amazing idea. But I think it still will remain contrarian. For me, the turning point is probably whatever the Gen 2 of this device is, right? So as soon as Meta proved out Quest, they probably improved their capabilities in terms of the hardware, and then Apple have been able to bring their device down to a more consumer-friendly level. I think that's the point where we really see a surge of investor activity. But let's see. I think either way, we're in a good position as an early stage fund. So either way it goes, we'll be here supporting the founders. Okay, so next up. So again, changing gears slightly. So prediction number 4, natural interactions using voice, gaze, gestures will usher in the new pinch and zoom, tap and swipe.
Yeah, This one in particular has been consistent in year over year for me in my AR trend report. But particularly, I was thinking about Apple's announcement with the Vision Pro and how it was to launch without a controller, but yet focus mainly on voice and hand gestures as inputs. And so I think this is something quite powerful, and it's something that we saw when the iPhone was first launched as like basically a connected brick of glass that had like a touch screen that asked developers, especially game developers, to rethink how are people going to play games? How are people going to interact with software? And I think we're at this really interesting time where the device manufacturers are really pushing hard on a new ways to interact with our software and that are much more natural, which lend itself well to the more immersive headset experience. And so I'm really eager to watch these developers and designers and what choices they make within their applications, and certainly through the applications that win over the user. We're going to start to see, I believe, a new design paradigm, a new UX paradigm bubble up. That most likely will also be shaped by, the device manufacturers themselves through their design guidelines, their design documentation. And so these early days, look out for the new, pinch and zoom, the new tap, the new swipe, using eyes, using voice, using hands. And it will all come out through the works of the developer ecosystem, in my opinion.
I'm really excited about this part. The concept of being able to more naturally interact with computers is such a thrill. To be able to use voice in a more natural way, and I think AI is going to help with that as well. Natural language processing. I'm really excited about being able to interact with computers. I look forward to the day where I don't have to type anymore, right? Like all of this is coming, and you can definitely see it with the Vision Pro. I think it's be a massive change this year.
Yeah, it's definitely a theme we're investing against at FOV. Kind of big kind of unashamed plug to our company DoublePoint. So DoublePoint was out at CES. They just launched their new developer kit, and what they do is effectively this. So they're making it easier for developers to build in these kind of natural kind of gesture interactions, and using it through the wrist. So kind of being able to anyone wearing any Android OS or other type of smartwatch to be able to do some of these gestures. And I think what's really interesting, I feel like I've talked about Apple a lot in this session, but as soon as someone like Apple they announce their kind of double tap, that is what someone like DoublePoint is actually doing. So all of a sudden you have the other big players like Microsoft's, Google's, etc., who are like, right, somebody's introduced a new design paradigm or a new interaction paradigm, and then people are going to kind of iterate on top of that. So I actually think, although this is definitely going to be an area where it will be the Metas and the Apples and the Googles that drive this space, I think there's a lot of room for innovation within startups who are kind of designing around the edges of these, and will probably likely be kind of acquisition targets for those bigger companies. Another area we've been looking at is more kind of neural interfaces, an area that Meta's been acquiring companies in. Shout out to a company called Wisear in France. They do this, one of the things that they're working on, amongst others, is the ability to do voiceless speech recognition. Because if I have to talk to my device, I'm on the subway and I've got to say, hey, like do this, then I can't do that. But if I can just mouth those words and the interaction still happens, it's things like that are going to get really, really clever. So yeah, a lot of it sometimes seems a bit Minority Report and very futuristic, but there's a lot of smart talent working on these things, and super excited to see what will be next.
A little bit of security and privacy, to your very final point, the 24th point of 24, Tom, some of those things we're going to need to be able to, be aware of as we're developing in this new space. But for the most part, I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Dave, the mouthless talking is wild, and I'm going to look that up immediately. But it does speak to, while exciting as it is to see this new UX paradigm come together, it's gonna, I believe, feel a little awkward just because it's so new, and it's going to remind us, I think, of the transition from like the clicky BlackBerry to the non-clicky, iPhone usage, and I think this is gonna caused a lot of visceral reaction of people that like to do things the old way and like are being faced with a brand new way of doing things. Case in point, like to not type, to not have a keyboard is going to be very jarring for people. I think just in general, it's been our life for the most part. And so let's just see how this goes. It's going to be a fun ride.
Yeah, and I think I mean, even if we look at voice input, I mean, we've had Amazon, we've had Siri, we've had Alexa. Those things are still a little bit clunky. Like Amy said, hopefully they're improved by this kind of new gen of LLMs and AI. But there are certainly certain computing tasks, whatever they are, that actually just typing on a keyboard is always going to be easier than voice. But again, like now that we have these abilities, I've been pitched recently by kind of XR gaming companies, and they're targeting the Vision Pro, and they want to build games just around like voice input and kind of gesture input. And I think once developers have the challenge of saying, hey, we don't have controllers or we don't have keyboards, what we can do, it will be interesting to see the experimentation. But let's move on. We've got 3 more to cover in the last 20 minutes here, and I'm sure we can leave room for a bit time for a few kind of open questions as well. But your point number 5 was multimodal AI triggers a wearable tech renaissance fueled by virtual assistants that want to make sense of the world. And this takes us far beyond kind of VR and AR, right?
100%. This was kind of like a nod back to 2012, 2013, which was definitely my favorite time in technology, where it was like the wacky world of wearable technology, fueled by Indiegogo and Kickstarter. And it seemed that sensors were going to be everywhere on our body and doing a multitude of things. But yet it fell flat in many cases, mainly because the missing ingredient, which is evident now in retrospect, was the AI and the lack of advancements within AI. And so with AI, in particular, multimodal AI, now a real viable solution. We're seeing how wearable devices that have cameras, that have a microphone, can really be very powerful solutions. So case in point is Meta Ray-Ban's use of the camera on the Ray-Ban device, giving eyes to Meta AI. And so we saw Zuckerberg, do his demo where he looked at a shirt and asked, like, what pair of pants would you pair with the shirt? And so, this is a real powerful reason to wear your virtual assistant as a pair of glasses, is because giving your virtual assistant eyes makes complete sense, so that it can actually see what you're seeing. And so I suspect that we're going to see some, old wearable ideas come back now that multimodal AI is a viable option. And it all centralizes around these virtual assistants getting much smarter, getting much more contextual, basically getting eyes and ears, using sensors and the combination of AI. And this in particular, I think we're going to see a lot of activity from the existing virtual assistants in our world. Alexa, Google Assistant, Siri, all of these are going to need major refreshes now that they have the ability to be more meaningful in our lives.
Just as you said, Siri, it triggered my smart monitor in front of me. So
no, of course.
Yeah, the background. Sorry, Amy.
The world that we'll live in, right? Yeah, the other interesting use case, imagine being able to look at a menu and then look at a wine menu and then having it just pair what you're going to drink with what you're going to eat, right? Just fun things like that too.
Yeah. Well, I loved Rabbit's example, the little retro-looking gadget that was announced at CES that has a camera and its own AI assistant, and they took a picture of what's in their fridge and asked it to create a low-calorie menu, and it did it. I've been playing around with that already with GPT, now that GPT also has image as an input. But certainly there's something to be said about moving that up to a camera that's easily used as a pair of glasses, where you don't have to pull your smartphone. So that immediacy of being able to say, like, here's what I'm looking at, and help me, connect the dots, like you said, Amy, without pulling up my smartphone. I think that's kind of the direction we're headed with this.
Yeah, I think what's exciting is to your point, Tom, it's going back to that world of experimentation. I think it's going to take a long time for this kind of AI hardware assistant on your pocket. Like, I think it's going to happen, but it's going to take experimentation. And we probably won't see something go really mainstream for a couple of years. But I mean, take Humane, for example. I mean, I feel like they came in for a hard time. They got panned a little bit, but it's great to see people like that pioneering and moving things forward, frankly.
Yeah, I would suspect that we're going to see most of this activity just on our smartphone, to be quite honest. Like, our smartphone is a connected camera. We're expecting to see more on-device AI advancements from the OEMs and the operating systems, and so that's where I would see most of the use. That being said, as you mentioned, Dave, I think we're going to see a lot of experimentation with wearables that pull us away from having to put our smartphone in our hand to do this and take that extra step out. And they'll have some legitimacy, and they'll have a lot of users that really believe in moving away from having to use their smartphone as much. But to Amy's point around privacy before, this is kind of where having a camera on your face will always fall down. And that's just the world making sense of having a camera as a pair of glasses. There's a lot of societal and cultural concerns around that. So there's an uphill battle there.
Yeah, I think you said, I mean, you touched on this in 2024, but I look back at 2023, and one of the predictions was that smart glasses would get their smart watch moment with the return of Google Glass for consumers. I mean, I think the biggest thing that happened last year was the release of the Meta Ray-Ban, Ray-Ban Meta's smart glasses, I think they were called. I can never get that right. I was a real skeptic of the entire smart glass category. For me, it always just felt like never going to catch on. It's a bit of a dud. There's no utility. I was surprised though. I mean, I'm a glass wearer anyway. My regular glasses are Ray-Bans, and I bought a pair of Meta Ray-Bans and was wearing them quite a bit while I was traveling over Christmas. And I'm using them a lot. And actually, it's not even these smart glasses don't have true kind of AR. It really is just taking photos, but also just, I was impressed by how much I use the audio, like just being able to have a pair of glasses and being able to kind of hear things. And then Meta announced that they're kind of augmenting that with some of their kind of AI abilities and the assistant abilities. So I've maybe kind of changed my outlook on this smart glass category. But I still, every time I mention it, I kind of cringe at myself a little bit. It seems wrong somehow. Amy and Tom, like, have you been wearing any of these smart glasses? What do you think of that category?
Amy?
Back when Bose had the AR glasses, I was a huge fan, and I think I wore them a lot longer than most people did. I was really excited about what could happen. Again, that whole concept of how do we get away from a flat screen and typing to being more interactive with the digital content. I haven't tried the Ray-Bans, the newer version of the Meta Ray-Bans yet, but I'd like to, particularly as it's integrated with AI.
I, in my report on looking back on 2023, indicated that this one I overstepped and was a little bit too bullish on in wanting the return of Google Glass. But I do think that we're going to continue to see a myriad of connected eyewear devices that do a lot of different things. Some just do, screen mirroring, as we're seeing with some of the Rocket and X-Real devices. Some just take pictures and now can, use multimodal AI. Some are actual heads-up display, whether monocular or binocular. And then we have, our optical see-through devices, which are even rarer. So I'm not quite sure if the smart glasses are ready for their smartwatch moment. Again, I think there's so much to unravel with the glasses that are out in the wild, in public, meaning like the heads-up display kind of Google Glass like use case. But I see more validity and kind of acceleration in video glasses that you use on a plane or use on a train, or in the park, or with these sunglasses that can take a picture or live stream to enable more social media moments. I think those have the ability to move forward a lot quicker than bringing back the heads-up display.
And Roku just raised another 70 million, so they're going to continue to move forward on what they've got in terms of headwear.
Yeah, I think for me, maybe because I'm already a glass wearer, like all I'm doing is taking what is my existing kind of behavior and just kind of adding capabilities. I think it's maybe harder when you're trying to convert a non-glass wearing person and say, hey, look, put this thing on your face. And then the other thing that I've noticed with my own behavior is it is the kind of, there is a bit of social awkwardness. You feel a bit paranoid. Like if you're on the train and you're looking at someone, they're like, oh, does this person know I could be taking a photo of them? But I had it for at least about a week with my family, and I didn't tell anyone that I was wearing smart glasses, and nobody actually noticed, and there wasn't an issue. And but I still felt the need, like when I was meeting strangers, that I would take off the smart glasses and I'd put back on my usual ones. So yeah, there's a lot in there, but I think that brings us neatly to the final point, which is around privacy and social contracts, right? Because this, something like the Ray-Ban smart glasses, that's really just the tip of the iceberg. When we're all walking around with a humane pin on our lapel, and other devices that have these cameras, like cameras are becoming pervasive anyway. But yeah, Tom, talk us through how you see this one and what are the full implications here.
This one's a big one to unpack, and there's like many ways to slice and dice it. I think the New York Times published a story at the tail end of 2023 around Meta Ray-Ban devices. They called it the new age of surveillance, and I think it really articulated, how we need to really think about safety, privacy, security when it comes to the ubiquity of sensors, just full stop. And really, when we think about spatial computing, I would say the one commonality across the board for spatial computing to succeed is more sensors, and giving computers the ability to perceive our world through their own sense of the world is paramount for us to usher in this next wave of computing. And it's going to mean that we're going to need to have new laws, new social contracts, new social norms, and essentially like redefine privacy in order for these sensors to make their way out and be active in more places. And so a lot of really great work needs to happen. There's a lot of really important groups that are already really focused on this. The XR Guild, which Amy is part of, is one of them, really thinking about ethics within the XR space. We have XRSI, which is all around safety and cybersecurity. And so, I'm certainly continuing to ramp up on my expertise in this space. I think if you're in XR or in spatial computing, you're responsible for thinking about this part of ushering in this game-changing technology, but also have to understand that it is one of those aspects that we need to consider when we think about the acceleration of adoption, because the technology might be ready, the hardware might be ready, the software might be ready, but the people might not be ready. And we already have seen glimpses of this actually back in 2013 with Google Glass. The fact that the glass users were being called glass holes was really a reflection of how invasive these devices were seen within society. And Dave, to your point about feeling a little bit uncomfortable about having a pair of glasses that have a camera, it speaks to this need for us to figure out how to make sure that the power dynamics are much more equalized with these devices out in the wild. And we can look back to 2007 and 2008. I highly recommend anybody in the XR space to Google feature phone camera 2007, read through the articles, and remind ourselves that even just, back 20 years ago, when flip phones started to have cameras that were connected to the internet, they were banned in restaurants, and they were banned in movie theaters, and they were banned in locker rooms. Because of the fear of the ability for people, everyday people, to now take pictures and not just to take pictures, but to be able to distribute those pictures. And so there were a lot of laws that went into place around the use of these phones, and a lot of discourse within the public sphere on figuring out how to make sense of the use of these. Eventually, the right laws get into place and the right conversations are had. But more so, what also happens is more people have the device, which kind of levels the playing field. Because in the beginning, it feels like there's few that have the ability to take, photos, and more that have the ability to be, the victim of those photos. So there's lots to unpack here, but I think it's a big point of conversation that we need to address on a regular basis.
Yeah, biometrics, I think, is another important thing that we need to keep an eye on. Who has access to our heart rates, and if we're sweating or our temperature is rising, or where our eyes go on a screen. So I think that's another area. But I agree with you, Tom. From developers to UI folks to marketers to leaders to investors, we all have to be thinking about who are we investing in. Who is building this next stage, and how are they treating privacy and personal information?
Yeah, for sure. So we have 4 minutes left, so we probably have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. So if anyone has a question of something or a comment on something that we haven't brought up, then feel free to bring it up. We have one here, just maybe like your kind of 30-second thoughts, both of you, on healthcare use cases, especially behavioral health. Amy, you want to go first?
Healthcare is a great place for spatial computing. We're seeing it not only in training. I have seen there's a lot of therapy, quite a few therapy applications out there. I love to see the meditation ones and wellness. Companies like Helium and Trip can expand just from VR to spatial computing in general, and are already doing so. So yeah, I think it's I think it's a great space.
Tom?
Yeah, I'm just going to plus one to what Amy said. I think one thing we may see is giving AI a face is going to be quite instrumental in therapy like use cases. We're already starting to see GPT and AI be used as like a therapeutic process, like in order for people to work through problems, or to have a space to be able to chat about things that are on their mind. And so I can imagine more mixed reality applications that start to put more of a human touch to that through things like avatars.
Yeah, I think maybe I should shout out one of our portfolio companies, a company called Haven. I don't think they've released on the App Store yet, but are working in VR and mixed reality for things like meditation and helping with mental health. And yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that can go to specific areas as well, like just thinking about like kind of teenage mental health and helping with things like anxiety, and really kind of honing in on some of those use cases will be great. And I think it will be an important category for Apple, right? I mean, they already, the watch is getting close to being a medical device, and I think they can lean into combining some of those things and bringing that into spatial computing more as well. That will be super interesting. Okay, well, I think we're up on time, and I want to leave on time so we can respect your schedules. I want to say a massive thank you to you both, and also to the audience for tuning in. This whole session is recorded, so we will be putting this out, and if you want to catch up, if you missed the beginning, then it will be here, and also on the FOV Ventures blog, which is on viewpoints.fov.ventures. Amy and Tom, maybe you can give some last plugs to where people can find you and follow along. Amy, where can people find you on the web, and anything to plug?
I'm always plugging all of our companies in the portfolio. So that's wxrfund.com/portfolio. And you can find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Tom, final word to you.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's so good chatting with you, Amy and Dave, on our favorite subject, augmented reality, spatial computing. You can always find me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm quite active.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I would say just anyone, if you're watching on LinkedIn now, just stop what you're doing, click on Tom's face and go and follow him, because he is one of the best sources of news for across.
Sure.
Just come out of CES, doing a lot of kind of blogging about new investments and trends in this space. So thank you both for joining. I've really enjoyed this session, and yeah, hopefully we can come back in 2025 and see what we got right.
Awesome. Thank you,
Thanks for
everybody.
having us.
Take care. Thanks.